Welcome back to the Irish Mags Show, episode 52, which can only mean one thing, listeners and viewers. It's our 1 year anniversary. Happy birthday, lads. We are one today.
Happy birthday, I suppose.
Happy birthday.
Yeah. A whole year without getting cancelled. Who would have thought? I don't know how we've got there, but we did. Here we are. I'm Paul, and I'll be your host for today. And joining me, you've already heard their voices, the usual suspects in Alan and Krisho. And we have a very special guest this week, making his Irish Mags Show debut on our 1 year anniversary. It's journalist, author, and podcaster, Mr. Harry DeCosimo. Great to have you here, Harry, for our birthday. Thanks for coming to the party.
Thanks,
the only person
Paul.
that turned up.
Thank you so much for having me. Honoured to be here on such a special day.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to ask you in advance, but if you have any secret hatred for the Irish, you're probably in the wrong place. But it's too late now. I should have asked you before that.
Luckily, no, I don't have any secret hatred for any Irish people now.
Okay, fair. The first question we normally ask, Harry, is have you actually been to Ireland?
Northern Ireland, not the Republic of Ireland. I've got some family who live near Belfast, so that's the only way I've got across. I really do want to go to Dublin though. My brother's been plenty of times.
As the resident non-Dublin man here, as the resident non-Dublin man here, so you can go to Dublin and that's fine. Maybe 2 days maximum. Then there's other parts of Ireland you need to see because too many people only go to Dublin. But if you do go to Dublin, go on a match day. We'll have meetups in the Bleecker Street Bar in Dublin.
Yeah,
the two lads here decided will be there. I might even travel as well because, that's a good Saturday when there's a match on in the Bleecker. You get a good 12-hour shift done in there easily. Right. Well, on this week's show, we're going to have a brief chat about some of our highlights and maybe lowlights from the past year of the Irish Mags Show. I'm told Harry has actually watched all of the shows, lads, just to prepare.
I'm sure.
Coming on with us today.
Happy days.
He's watched back through 51 shows. Listening to us talking absolute shit, so that's a hell of an achievement in itself. And of course,
the level of detail I have to go through as a journalist.
Hey, look, you know what? Like the rewards are few and far between, but we know the effort that goes into it. Don't worry. Fair play, we appreciate it. We're also going to have a look back on that defeat against West Ham, a very, very tough game to take and digest and process. And I think a lot of us still aren't over it, so we're going to be able to vent some of those thoughts on the show today, where it all went wrong. And we'll turn our thoughts to the season ahead and maybe a chat about that Crystal Palace game at the weekend, where hopefully we can get things back on track. Because if we don't, there'll be some black clouds. And I fear what will happen with Krisho Allen, to be honest. I don't know how much he can take.
Nearly explode, yeah. I had to get a new TV. I'll tell you this later, but I had to get a new TV after the last half an hour against West Ham. Honest to God.
The thing is, you see, we need Krisho to be happy because if Krisho's not happy, we have to listen to it, and then the listeners have to listen. So, we really need Eddie Howe and Newcastle to do us a favor. But before we get to all of that, let's quickly give our listeners a glimpse into the world of Harry DeCosimo. We'll start with the easy question, Harry. Maybe we should talk about your origins as a Newcastle fan. We like to ask all of our guests, where did it all begin? What are your earliest memories as a Newcastle fan?
So I'm sure you can hear there's no Geordie accent here, but my dad's from Gateshead, so I don't remember ever choosing to be a Newcastle fan. There's that sort of cliched thing of having a Newcastle shirt thrown on you as a kid, and that sort of thing of growing up with it really, and actually being born in 1994 for the first 10 years mostly, it was a great laugh. And then sort of when I got to 18 to 20, I was sort of cursing my dad for asking what I'd done wrong. But no.
At least you've someone to blame, Harry, because a lot of us don't. We've only ourselves to blame.
Well, yeah. I mean, so it's kind of been that, and then we had season tickets. I've got my two brothers are also Newcastle fans. So the first when my first foray into having a season ticket was about 2000, and we shared the season tickets mostly till I got one of my own towards the end of my time going as a fan, which sort of 2015-16 coincided with the relegation to the Championship, second relegation to the Championship, and then I sort of gave up the season ticket. I say to sort of pursue my journalistic dreams, but actually I really need to sort of not go to depress myself every week anymore. But yeah, it was a very sort of Jekyll and Hyde sort of existence. My first game was a defeat against Middlesbrough in about, I think, April 2000 or something. Yeah, it was I think, and because my family live in North Yorkshire, which is like the closest team is Middlesbrough. Like 10 years later, if that happened 10 years later, I wouldn't have been able to go to school because I would have been like I was a pariah, pretty much supporting Newcastle because they like to pretend that they've got a rivalry with us. But yeah, once it got going, it was very good. In the early years, obviously, Sir Bobby Robson was the manager, and it was a great time. And then obviously it got progressively worse until that. Now I go whenever I go, I usually go in the press box as a journalist. So it's sort of a different experience, but it's still sort of you still get that same buzz walking into St James's Park every time you do.
Very good. Well, I suppose, yeah, you were born at a good time, I suppose. For those listeners that came into it when it was the Entertainers era, or even we get a lot of listeners, a lot of the Irish magazine, and lots of fans who might have come into it in the Bobby Robson era, coming into it at a good time, I suppose. But equally have experienced the bad times, no more than the rest of us, I suppose. And it is, we always say it is a roller coaster.
I just want to just follow on from what you said, Harry. Does the giving up the season ticket thing sting now, or were you able to somehow reclaim a season ticket some way?
He went for it. He's gone for it.
Well, I because I can go whenever I go, I'll go as a journalist, and I don't really have time to go to games anymore. But my dad gave up his season ticket a year before I did, and then was like completely fine with it. And then the takeover happened, and then he's sort of joined this ballot thing that everyone, everyone's joined and keeps getting frustrated by the ballots and all that sort of thing. So that question really sort of reflects more my dad than me, because I can when I go, I tend to go as in a different capacity, but or I'm elsewhere on a weekend, so I'm busy working somewhere else. But it was difficult. I mean, you kind of. But I guess with the whole thing, you when people gave up their season tickets, I don't think they were thinking about the takeover, but it was always a possibility, wasn't it, that the people who stuck with it through that were always going to be the ones who got rewarded, and then that's the whole argument now, isn't it? But actually, it actually got worse after. I would say it got worse after I gave up my season ticket before it got better. So it wasn't one of those things where I was like, you're sort of really debating it at the time, partly because of career stuff and partly because it just wasn't fun at that point.
I've met a lot of people who've are in a similar situation, like people who did give up their season ticket and obviously haven't been able to get it back. But I suppose hindsight is always a wonderful thing, right? Nobody would have predicted kind of what would have followed, especially with the Champions League and everything. And I know a lot of people at the time, that was their means of protesting. That was their means of making the statement that not happy with how this club is being ran, not happy with Mike Ashley, the decisions that were made, the 2 relegations. So I wouldn't hold it against anyone, or I wouldn't blame anyone, and who did give it up, because, as you said, that was the only voice at the time, really, and things have changed a lot.
But wasn't there a case like where he like Mike Ashley sold half season tickets or something like that?
There was a point where I remember actually being in a press conference with Steve Bruce around Christmas. I think they'd just beaten Southampton in the year that in Steve Bruce's first season, and he was asked about the low attendance, and he sort of said this thing about, it's Christmas and this sort of the northeast of England, they struggle to afford tickets, and then they brought in the season tickets as a sort of half, these 10,000 season tickets that were, I think they were free. They were free because as long as you had it, I think if you had another season ticket, they were free, I think. But yeah, it was something that was sort of spun as a positive from the club in a PR situation. But actually, I remember being in there thinking to myself, this isn't a thing of people can't afford it. It's the thing that people are turning away because they just don't agree with the way that the club is going at the time.
We're celebrating our 1-year anniversary and our birthday. Let's not dig up old painful memories.
Steve Bruce.
No, yeah, and we're not supposed to say that name. And if we say it 3 times, he might appear on the pod, so we probably shouldn't do that. That's how Christian got here. And then, Harry, you talk. I mean, obviously, looking back a little bit, we talk about this good times and bad times. But like, I have to ask you, what would be your highlight then as a Newcastle fan? Let's say over the years, the topsy-turvy years.
I think I think the highlight of like the best game I've been to, and admittedly I wasn't there as a fan, I was there as a journalist, but the PSG game was ridiculous. Just for the whole buzz, the whole build up to it, it feels like a dream now to look back on that game. The performance was so perfect, but just that build up going. We got up to my dad and my brother went as fans, and I sort of they drove me up, and the city felt different that day, and then the press box felt like the ground was like full like an hour and a half before. Pretty much, it felt like it was like PSG were walking into a cauldron. And I'd been to the press conference the night before, and they clearly didn't understand what they were walking into, because they were talking about, the atmosphere will be big, and Newcastle are the team we don't want to face. And then they picked a formation that was very, very easy to play through. They played 2 midfielders against our 3, and we trounced them. And it was that was a game that really made me feel like it. It was something, because obviously I was too young for the Barcelona game. My dad was at that game. I didn't go to any of the previous Champions League games, even though actually at St James's Park there wasn't anything on that level because of the way that the Champions League fell. They'd lost their first 3 games. They were under pressure to win the next 3. So there was never a sort of like big big atmosphere moment. And then the PSG came along. It felt like a leveler. It felt like I could say, that's my version of Barcelona or whatever.
Yeah,
I think that's the same for a lot of fans. That's the same for a whole generation of fans. And just the beauty of that. I know that we sort of get into conversations about players like Almiron and Byrne and Longstaff, but the fact and even Cher to a point, the fact that they were the 4 goal scorers, and they were all either here pre-takeover or bought in a sort of very desperate attempt to maintain the very first building block of the takeover, sort of really showed that it was that togetherness was what brought them over the top, and I think it was togetherness, the atmosphere, and partly PSG's complete arrogance. I think they just assumed that they were going to turn up, but and win the game. But it really was I think the most special moment. I think for sure. Yeah,
I think it's a lot of people's special. I mean, it is obviously a more recent one. But just everything about it, the shock, the disbelief, the fact that it was PSG, the fact that it was Mbappe, the fact that the local lads were scoring, Champions League, the music, everything. I don't know. I mean, it's starting to feel like a long way away. But again, the last few days probably haven't helped that, because it's been a grim couple of days. Sadly, sticking with the theme of lowlights, Harry, I do have to ask you then, like, what would be your lowlight then as a fan, or whether it's going to games or some of the more notoriously bad things that have happened over the years?
I think the saddest I've ever been as a result of, or most like downbeat, was the UEFA Cup semi-final defeat in Marseille against when Drogba scored twice, and that was the only time I've ever cried at a football match. And yeah, that was horrendous, because I remember as well, like, and actually I've written a book on that whole era at Newcastle. So I've been back and spoken to a lot of people about that time, and looking over the results and things, looking over the team sheet, and actually didn't realize how shot the team was, like, in terms of injured players. Jonathan Woodgate had played the best game of his life against Drogba in the first leg, kept him at bay completely. He's injured. I can't remember who came in, but it wasn't don't think it was a fit centre back. I think it might have been even Steve Caldwell. Bless him, who's a great guy, but not a replacement for Jonathan Woodgate, and I think he would admit that himself. And Drogba just tore us apart, and that was a really sort of like, because that felt like that was the time, that was the opportunity to go through to that to win a trophy, because actually under Sir Bobby that never really felt close domestically, in terms of, like, they never got to they got to the semi-final in 2000, but beyond that there wasn't many other results that sort of gave hope of a FA Cup win or a League Cup win. But I think that where I felt most apathetic was probably at the end of the season before we got relegated under John Carver, another actually great guy, but again not a great manager. And it was at Leicester. I think we lost 3-0 at Leicester, and Mike Williamson got sent off for, like, and I think John Carver said Mike Williamson did it on purpose. And it was the fact that we we lacked so many ideas. It just felt like the club was dying a slow death. And I remember coming away from that game thinking, I don't really care what happens because they don't care. It doesn't feel like it feels like no one actually is even like if we stay up, then it'll happen again next year. And actually, the West Ham game was amazing because of Jonas Gutierrez's goal and all that. And that day was great. But then I walked out the stadium going, "What an amazing thing!" And then lo and behold, a year later, we're back there in actually the exact same position, and we go down. So that sort of reflected the sort of the highs and the nearly moment, but also the lows of the sort of the apathetic thing. And I think that's the thing that everyone needs to remember. I know it's disappointing to lose to West Ham, and I know it's disappointing, and we're sort of in a position where we're sort of thinking about needing to win at Palace and that, but think back to and this can't stand as a thing to after every defeat, but just in those big moments, think back to when it didn't matter because that was really, really bad.
Yeah, agreed.
Do you hear that, Chris? Show when you're at your lowest and you're angriest, just remember things were way worse.
I'm just saying they're still going to get it later on when we talk about West Ham.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. But that's by the by. But yeah, it's just a thing of like I think that there needs to be there just generally need to be a sort of sense of like perspective because it does there has been a point where nobody cared whether the team survived or went down or anything. So yeah.
Well, thankfully and hopefully, and thankfully those days are behind us. So we don't need to go down that far. And obviously our expectations and our standards and our hopes are a lot higher. Harry, you spoke a lot there about your work then as a journalist. Obviously you said attending games, hitting up the press box as a journalist, which is different to the experience of obviously watching as a fan, because not only you're working, but you consume it a lot differently. Maybe could you just tell us a little, I suppose, briefly about your own, like your career path? How did you get into all of it? Getting into the work as a journalist. I know you've done a lot of different work, whether it be written work with different publications online, obviously with different media, both nationally and locally. I'm familiar with it because you and I have talked about it. Maybe you could tell our listeners about the career path to date.
Yeah, I started it basically because I wanted to stay close to football, and I was never good enough to play football, and it was a thing of like, what can you do next? And I dabbled with doing my coaching badges, and sort of actually thought to myself, I could do it. It's the same. I actually came to the same sort of conclusion where you can do all your coaching badges and get nowhere near actually doing anything to do with it. Whereas at least if I went and got a degree, I'd have a degree and I could go and do something else with that. That was kind of my attitude. But I always had the drive to really stick with it because I love football that much and I wanted to be close to football. And actually, I enjoyed writing and I enjoyed talking about football and giving my opinion. So that sort of developed a love for journalism as well alongside that. And yeah, it's been from there's been a lot of ties to Newcastle. I've covered a lot of Newcastle games. I do a lot of stuff for various different people, and the publications have grown in stature over the last few years, which is great. And also, the book that I wrote was a passion project that sort of really was luckily coincided with COVID. Like exactly when I say coincided with COVID, I mean like I pitched it in March 2020, and I was writing it throughout the first lockdown. Which was great. So it was that sort of like I could never do it again because it's so busy. It was such I'm so busy. It was such a heavy workload. But at the time, I had nothing else to do. So I was, it was something that I always wanted on my CV basically. But it was a real passion project. And then I've got a big love for things like European football, and I like to cover the other Premier League clubs, and I don't want to just keep have Newcastle United as my only focus because that it's quite nice sometimes to it's quite nice to sort of think about something else and have the two separate. Like when you are at a Newcastle game, you are sort of like, as you say, you are very conflicted in between. Like you have to act like you don't want a team to win, but you really do want a team to win, and then those sort of a late goal goes in and you have to write about it. So you have to stay calm, but inside you're like, can I sell, that whole thing. And so it is difficult to do, but also it means that, when you're working on those projects, you get to speak to people that you grew up idolizing and getting to know people that you previously only saw on TV and that sort of thing, and that's quite surreal and it's quite special, and that's what really keeps it going rather than anything else. But yeah, it's been a great it's been great, and the good thing is as well, like you can always within journalism, especially when you're freelance, you can always do more or when you're in control of your own career, you can I always feel like I'm in control. If I'm not doing enough, I can pitch an article or go and look for something and try and find something else. If I'm doing too much, I can step back a little bit. I don't have to tell my boss that book a holiday day with my boss or anything like that. There are positives and negatives to that, but overall, it's been great fun, and hopefully it'll continue like that.
Awesome.
Yeah, as someone who's at the start of a similar path, I suppose equally, I like that idea of having that control of your own work, your own day in the freelance element. But it's a slog, as I know well from talking to people. Alan, it was interesting there. He talked about watching a game and seeing a team score and then trying to control your emotions and how happy you are. It must be like when Chris watches a Man United game, no?
That's exactly it. It's 100% that.
You 1 year anniversary.
It's 1 year anniversary.
Yes,
we had to. It got brought up on episode 1, and it's been brought up a year later on episode 50.
You pack of bastards. Harry excluded, of course. Welcome to the show. These guys are a pack of bastards. They're always bringing, basically, really quickly. My origin story, very quickly. I asked my mum for a United jersey because I was a Man United fan when I was 11, and she got me a jersey. I opened it up on my birthday. I held it up in front of me, and it was a big blue star and a black and white jersey. And I thought, oh my God. So she was, oh, you don't like it? And I took it down and said, no, I love it, Mum. It's great. It's exactly what I wanted. And I put it on. And then obviously at that time they were doing quite well. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to stick with this. So I stuck with it. Yeah, but they still think that I've got a Man United jersey on underneath this.
What we do know is anyone who's had to listen to Chris on the pod, talk to Chris in the Bleaker, meet Chris over in Newcastle, it's all his mom's fault. So
yeah,
super. And Harry, 2 more questions for you then before we move on to the next section.
Sure.
I suppose sticking with the kind of line of work in particular, best kind of interview or production or project you ever worked on?
I think there's a couple of answers. I mean, in terms of Newcastle, speaking to Les Ferdinand's an amazing thing because I grew up loving him, watching him when I was very young. Even when he moved to Spurs, like as a sort of 4 or 5 year old, I really liked him. So I didn't move to Spurs, but I sort of was like, this is really. It was that sort of horrible feeling. That was my first probably football heartbreak, was watching Les Ferdinand leave for Spurs as a young lad. So. I wouldn't say I've got to know him very well, but he's given me a few interviews over the years, and he's a great guy. I remember I went to the Paralympics in the summer and spent the afternoon with Jurgen Klopp, which was surreal. I can confirm that he's a much nicer guy when he's not moaning about Newcastle United's shithousery.
They all are.
But that was quite surreal. I got to spend a couple of hours with him, and actually, it wasn't just it's usually very much a case of like you get 5 minutes with these people, and then you move on, and there's people trying to maintain the whole thing and control the whole thing. But because I was working for someone who was very, I was working for the Paralympics official website at the time, we got more access, and I actually got to spend a bit of time with him. So those are the 2 things that really stick out in terms of the interviews. In terms of production, the book is a great thing, but I'm really proud of an article I did for the BBC last year when I went to Germany to watch Schalke last season. They were on the brink of like getting relegated to the 3rd division or 4th division in Germany as a former Champions League club, and actually a city that's sort of twinned with Newcastle, and a club that's sort of got very similar sort of connections with mining communities and the supporters and everything. That was a really sort of interesting story, and actually it was great to go and witness that firsthand. That's something I'm really proud of as well. But yeah, in terms of those names, I think Les Ferdinand just because of what he means to me, Jurgen Klopp because of who he is and how surreal that whole afternoon was to actually get to actually, as I say, I mean, I sat down with him for 2 hours basically, and I spent the afternoon with him, which is very, very surreal and very bizarre, and not many people in the world will get to do that. And certainly not in my line of work.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I hope you did tell him, Jason Tindall would beat him in a fight or something.
I think he knows that.
Yeah. I think he's a big man as well, so he may not fear him. Class. We'll include some links to some of those. I've actually read the Schalke article as well. It's actually really good. So we'll include some of the links to that in the description.
Thank you.
And then final question, Harry, because we always hope that a guest might let something slip they didn't intend to hear or give us some trade secrets. Best or funniest kind of Newcastle, like let's say anecdote, maybe it's a chance encounter, somebody you met, something you saw, something that happened. We always hope to get something humorous and entertaining in this section.
Ironically, it's probably a Jurgen Klopp press conference. When the game that that Newcastle drew, I think it was the game that Amanda Staley was actually a few years ago when Hosselu scored. And he was fuming after the game because Newcastle had been given, or Liverpool hadn't been given a penalty or something. And one of the journalists, he got into blows with one of the journalists who will remain nameless, and sort of like had a sort of to and fro with him, and then asked him a question like, "Did you think it was that sort of?" And you've probably seen him do it with other journalists. When he asked the reporter, "What did you think?" And then the reporter invariably goes, "I thought the opposite to what you said." And then he goes, well, you must know more about football than me. And that was effectively what he did. And then he storms out, and then he came back in, and I think he actually apologized to the journalist, I think, which is quite strange. But that's one that sticks into my memory. But there are
all know it was
like,
you, Harry.
Well, it wasn't me. Oh, and the other one that's really interesting, I think, is actually more interesting to Newcastle fans is. When Rafa Benitez was manager, we used to go around so you do the press conference, and then if you've ever been on like a tour of St James's Park, the way the press room works, there's like a little gap behind in the corridor where you go where you can come through from the stage, and you go around to talk to people for the Monday papers. So the main press conference, all the quotes are ready to use immediately. Then these are embargoed quotes for the Mondays, and that was where Rafa Benitez was like he was very clever usually, but there was a game against, I think it was Fulham, and he was fuming again. Like, I think it's a drab 0-0 draw in his final season, and I think he said something like, if we're going to get relegated at the end of the season, virtually, even if we're going to be struggling at the end of the season, even if we buy in the summer, even if we buy in January, we're going to be struggling. And all of us, we were like, there was like six of us who were all like, we all try to probe him and try and like get him to sort of calm down as to what he was saying, because I don't think, he went in a little bit too strong, and then he sort of realized that he'd gone in a bit too strong, and it was like, oh well, and then he actually came back and said it's not as bad as you kind of think, but what he'd actually said was effectively, regardless of whether we strengthen in January, we're going to be in trouble. And it was like, and then on the month, and then it was like, and then you think, what's Mike Ashley going to make of that? Like, what's he going to make of that in that situation? Like, that's not great. And it was one of the, and Rafa was excellent at managing the expectations of fans, but also getting his points across without sort of blurting a sort of Joe Kinnear level sweary rant at anybody. He was very, very meticulous with his press conferences. That's why that one was such a surprise, because he clearly sort of was far too emotional to be saying what he was saying, sort of like 20 minutes, half an hour after a football match that admittedly Newcastle had been very poor in, but it certainly wasn't needing what he said to sort of pour fire onto the fuel into the fire.
So what have we learned? Liverpool managers and ex-Liverpool managers get rattled in St James's Park. They just can't.
That's it.
Excellent, Harry. Thank you for sharing all of that and for allowing us to put you under the microscope, which we love to do here. Really great stories, anecdotes, all of that. And as we said, we'll put links to a lot of your content and things like that out below. We'll allow you to take a few minutes now to catch your breath, and you can have a bit of water if you want. And I'll make Alan and Krisho earn the wages that we do not pay them, because we're going to have a little chat about the fact that it's our 1-year anniversary of the Irish Mags show. Krisho is raising a glass. If you're not watching on YouTube, you should be. He's having a little sip.
It's a special 1-year anniversary cocktail. It's spiced Morgan's spiced rum mixed with red lemonade. Taylor Keith red lemonade. Anyone outside Ireland probably wouldn't know that, but TK red lemonade. It tastes like a Coca-Cola cube. And so, yeah,
Nice.
1 year anniversary.
Not bad.
And you know, Alan is also one for special occasions. He's decided to go outside the box and probably drink a can of Monster, because that doesn't happen every week. There it is. Who knew?
Has to be done.
Well, lads, we did want to have a little look back on a year worth of podcasting, right? This is episode 52. We've had a whole lot of things happen in the Newcastle world, in the Irish Mags world, all the travel, all the trips, all the podcasts, all the guests. Alan, I'd love to maybe ask you what like any particular highlights of the year so far for the Irish Mags show and your time here?
To be fair, I have absolutely loved every single minute of it. Like, from the guests to our blossoming friendship, it's just been absolutely unbelievable from start to finish. Yeah, and another thing that it was something that I always wanted to do, was set this podcast up, as you well know, and to finally get to fulfill it was just unbelievable to me. So I have to say, everything about the last year has just been amazing for me. So thanks, lads.
Oh, he loves us, Chris Show.
I do.
I knew it. I knew it.
And listeners, a little peek behind the curtain. The theme tune that you will have heard at the start of this episode has been in Alan's head for years. And I think the main thing he ever wanted to achieve was to get those two songs, Shipping Up to Boston and Bladen Races, mixed together for a podcast. And he fulfilled his lifelong dream when we got that.
And he nailed it.
Shout out to my mate Rory, who helped to produce that.
Absolutely unbelievable.
Krisho, what about yourself then? As much as you love Alan and myself as well, what stands out for you as a highlight of the last 12 months?
Well, like, it would be equally a highlight and a low light of spending most of my week with you guys. So, you know, it's nice to be the butt of jokes sometimes, but look, we've been serious sometimes. So it's nice to have this kind of an outlet every week, you know, other than outside of normal life. You know, Newcastle life sometimes is very up and down. So it's nice to have that kind of platform just to kind of go, Yeah, highlights would be Warren Barton or John Anderson interview. I really, really enjoyed them. The live special that we did in the Bleecker Street in the bar was fantastic.
Yes.
It was really enjoyable. There was real participation. It felt so real that we were, you know, rather than just sitting here remotely and doing our podcast, being in front of everybody, all our Irish Mags fans, was fantastic.
We need to do that again. We definitely
yes, absolutely.
Before or after Christmas, let's see what we can do. We need to
after Christmas.
It takes Paul about 3 or 4 days to get up from wherever he is in the west of Ireland.
It's a long way on my bike, Chris. Okay.
Yeah, I know. But like the lowlights would be, you know, like watching Mickey and watching Sean Longstaff every week. So I won't go into that yet. The loss to Man United the loss to Man Red in the Cup, which still burns to this day, gives me heartburn. But other than that, it's been nice. So happy 12 months, 55 hours, I think, Paul, if we check back, 55 hours or 56 hours we've been together. That's a long time.
I must put that on my invoice for Kev.
We'll hit him up with that too.
Oh, Christian, it's coming, lads. It's coming. I think like everything you said there, for myself, especially, like, we've had great guests on, and I'm not just saying that because Harry's here. Harry, you're obviously the best guest we've ever had on, and I won't say that to the next guest that we have on. But like, I've loved having different. Like, we've had good variety of guests on. You know, you mentioned ex-players like John Anderson, we had Warren Barton. I really enjoyed when we had Ted Knutson on from StatsBomb, and I spent an hour with him, just showing me graphs about transfer targets. And I think it was as episodes go, it was one of the best that went down in terms of people's reaction to it, because it just kind of opened up the whole data analysis side of things. And we're definitely going to try and get something like that in the pipeline in the next few weeks, because there's a little January transfer window on the horizon. Chris, you mentioned the live show we did in the Bleecker. I actually loved the live shows we did as well, like obviously streaming. Sean Casey is very Marmite for some people, and he'd say that himself. But I actually really liked having Sean on, not only for the crack and talking about transfers and, you know, picking his brain on some of the information, but he also spoke really well about football, and I think a lot of people were surprised at that. So we'll definitely be having more of that to come as well, because I've called him out now in the WhatsApp group, so he can't back down. If you're listening, Sean.
Sean.
Yeah, and obviously because Harry's here, like we've had a great kind of an overlap with True Faith. Having Alex and Charlotte on, we've had Stu on. And obviously Harry now as well. So we'll keep having the Irish Mags infiltrate the True Faith podcast and vice versa. You know, just to keep the partnership going. Harry, I assume that being here is your highlight of the Irish Mags show, even though we know you've just watched 55 hours worth of content before going on with it.
Yeah, it's been great to be here. But whenever you get to speak to Warren Barton, just on him, because he's actually speaking to him tomorrow for an article. Just how he genuinely is like one of the easiest people to speak to. I'm sure you're aware of that, having had him on. But he's just so like accommodating, isn't he? Like how easy he is to speak to, how willing he is, like to chat to as well. But also, I don't know if you noticed this if you ever ask him a question, he'll answer that one, and then the next 6 that you've got lined up, he'll go into in the next, and you're like, okay, well, I don't need to ask him another question. He's just one of the very best people to have on a podcast or to interview, because he's just he's so down to earth and so nice, and actually, a genuine NUFC legend as well. But also he's very good at being interviewed, because he's very open and likes to tell people what he thinks, which is great as well.
Yeah, he told us some great stories as well, and as well, he's not a Geordie, as we know, but he might as well be. He clearly loves the club.
He's
great time, of course. And obviously captained the club and was there for so long under different managers. So yeah, definitely that was a good one as well. Okay, I didn't mention a low light, but my low light is probably going to help us segue into the next topic, lads. So brace yourselves, because I would say Harry will agree with this. I think you lads will agree. Anyone who knows. One of the hardest things to do is to record a podcast after a defeat, after a bad result, and after a bad weekend. It is hard to then gather your thoughts, compose yourself, and go and record and talk about it. But it does serve as a form of therapy, I think, for us, or at least it's therapeutic at times. Mm-hmm. So let's do that right now, lads. We're going to have to talk, sadly, about that game at the weekend, where it was Newcastle United 0, West Ham 2. Obviously, very disappointing, Harry. I know you would have watched it. I believe you weren't at the game, but I suppose we'd probably just start off with your overall thoughts, and I guess where are you looking in terms of, I don't want to say blame, but cause. Will you be looking at the selection, or are you looking at the management? Are you looking at the players?
I think you've got to look at the players initially, because that game, it was always something to be sort of worried about. Not worried about is a strong word, but it was a little concerning to me that everybody in the country seemed to be back in Newcastle. And on the Sky Sports coverage, Theo Walcott was asked literally 30 seconds before kickoff, "Can you make a case for West Ham winning this game?" And he said no, and he laughed. And you think, this just feels a little bit not, you don't like Newcastle being in that position. And they started well. Isak has the ball in the net, and Gordon gets going, and actually West Ham, they're trying to sit deep, and they're trying to make the pitch compact, and they're trying to be narrow and basically contain Newcastle, but they're too nervous to get into any sort of position to do it. So Newcastle have got West Ham where they want them for the first 15 minutes. Then that goal goes in from absolutely nowhere. And then I'm shocked at how quickly it just collapsed. The whole structure of the team, everything just went completely, like there was no, they couldn't kick, they couldn't keep the ball, they couldn't pass the ball, they couldn't do whatever they were trying to do, wasn't working. And it was strange. And actually, in the second half, once Wan-Bissaka scored, they conceded another chance straight after, when Jarrod Bowen has a shot and Nick Pope has to make a save. And I think it made me think actually back to a number of these things. Whenever Newcastle concede, they're one of the most vulnerable teams from their own sort of like inability to react to that when they concede a goal. And I would love to see some stats, because I think that they would absolutely back that up. The other thing, though, I think about the substitutions, I mean, that bench with Barnes, Wilson, Tonali, Murphy and Almiron, that is the strongest bench it's been for a long time. And I remember we've spoken about it quite a few times on the True Faith pod, Paul, but also previously in various other formats. I have certainly about that Villa game on the opening day of last season, and how the substitutions were what really turned that game and made that game for Newcastle's place, and how easily that helped Newcastle, and how that was always going to be the bedrock. That same bench pretty much was available, and they actually got worse when the substitutions were made. I thought you got to credit West Ham with what they did, because Lucas Paquetá and Carlos Soler, who I thought were easy to get, would be easy to get at, because they're not particularly mobile, they're not particularly defensive minded. If Newcastle get the counter press going, you think that's how they'll win the game. But actually, they turned us over in that area, and they were very good. And Paquetá was phenomenal. Actually, what Paquetá did made me think actually what Newcastle miss is somebody who does something a bit different. Like I think Bruno, Tonali, Longstaff, they're not the same player, but they're roughly sort of like they sort of get the ball and give the ball type players, and then out wide you've got players who will run and make specific runs and do specific things that Eddie Howe asks them to do. In Gordon, Murphy, and Almiron, they're sort of, and Barnes as well. They're very predictable in what they do, and when it works really well. We've seen that, but there's very little in that squad that does anything different. And if you look at West Ham with Paquetá, you look at Spurs at the weekend with Maddison, you look at Szoboszlai for Liverpool, all three players who Newcastle have been interested in, they all did really well in high up the pitch and lower, and in Paquetá's case, lower in the pitch as well, in a deeper position. But they were free to do what they wanted to do, and they took the game by the scruff of the neck in their own way and did what they. And Newcastle need a player like that, I think, because other than that, other than when it goes well, as I say, and it's been going well. It went well against Forest. It went well against Arsenal. But when it doesn't, there doesn't seem to be that answer. And I think the reason that there's no answer to that is because there's nothing different about the team. There's nobody who comes and does something a little bit different. As I say, everybody is very good at what they do in their specific roles, but they kind of have to be unlocked. Like we saw that with Wilson, with Willock. We're all looking at Willock thinking he can sort of get into the space behind that West Ham midfield. But if he's not unlocked, if he's not found, then he can't do it. Whereas, you need somebody in a higher up position, I think, to take the ball and run at the, somebody like what Hatton Ben Arfa used to do for Newcastle, Alan St. Maximin used to do for Newcastle, but more in a central area, a bit like, as I say, the players I mentioned before. So, yeah, there's a lot to criticise about both. I think the setup but it starts with the players, because that mentality drop after the goal was just unforgivable and quite inexplicable as well.
Yeah, and I'm trying to get my head around, is it a mentality issue? Is this tactical? Is this in the players' heads? Maybe it's all of the above. But Alan, one of the things I can't get away from is we have an innate ability to go and play big teams in big games. Man City, Arsenal, Chelsea. And, maybe is that because they press higher, they take more chances, there's, more more opportunities to expose them and break its speed on the counter, because we seem to just not like being on the ball. We'd rather be off the ball and then breaking. We can't seem to break down these low block teams, these, I don't want to say lower level teams, but let's call them lower place teams that are further down the league, who do sit in, who do sit tight, who do drop deep, play a low block. We can't seem to break them down at all.
No. It's something it's very evident for the last year, let's be honest about it, but it seems that Eddie he sticks with his team, and we know that, and that's not a bad thing, if you know what I mean. But sometimes I feel like he's a bit over-reliant on players. We were playing West Ham at home in a game where we all thought we were going to do much, much better than we did. Why are we trying to play? Those are the types of games where we should be picking Tonali to start again. He is more creative than Sean Longstaff. We should be imposing ourselves onto West Ham. We didn't. It's something that we've struggled to do an awful lot. And as Harry was saying, we don't have that creative force anywhere in that midfield. Joe Linton is an enforcer. Bruno gives the 5-yard simple pass and does it excellently well. He'll get the ball, he'll win a foul, he'll give it away, he'll do exactly what you want him to do. We don't have anyone that can pick that 15-yard pass that will open up the defence. It's something that Alex Isak done it for Sweden. Maybe that's an option. Drop him back, play Wilson in front. Something has to change somewhere. I've often said I'd love to see us play a 4-2-3-1 with Isak in the 10 and Wilson up top. Is that going to be a possibility? I don't know, but something has to change. It can't just continually be a problem where someone sits in, we don't score in the first 15 minutes, we run out of ideas, we get caught on the break, we're 1-0 down, we throw the kitchen sink at it, and suddenly we're 2-3, 4-0 down. We're going, what's happening here? Something has to change eventually. There has to be a plan B. And sometimes we have to start with that plan B to catch teams out. Because I just feel we are constantly doing the same things over and over and over again. Sometimes it doesn't work.
Yeah, a bit one-dimensional, I think. And, I was on the True Faith pod doing the review, and the thing I couldn't get away from was we went and we beat Nottingham Forest away from home. We set up to play Nottingham Forest at home, who were in third place at the time in flying form. we went out with a setup to play a team in their own ground and a team that were higher than us in the league at the time. And then we went to play West Ham at home. We set up the exact same way with the same team, the same lineup, and the same system. And like very early in the game, we had a lot of the ball. And as Harry said, we had the ball in the net very early. Granted, he was offside. But it just feels like, why aren't we doing something different? Why aren't we looking at it and saying, well, we're playing West Ham at home now. We are the dominant team. We don't need to set up to stop them. We need to actually dominate them. And that's where, again, hindsight is a wonderful thing. But players like Tonali, even a Barnes, they want to be on the ball more. Whereas, like Joe Linton, as great as he is, I'm a massive Joe Linton fan. Same with Longstaff, like he's done great. They don't like being on the ball. So therefore, we're not going to hold on to it. And I think that's where it's a bit of a struggle. Krisho.
Yeah, Jesus Christ.
I'm going to say the word. I'm going to say the word shambles, and then I'm going to say the word defense, and I'm going to put them together because here's another kind of, I suppose, beef I've noticed. We don't concede lots of goals, but when we're conceding goals, they are actually almost silly in nature. You find yourself, when you look back on the replays, you kind of look at them and go, like, that's just a bit of a shambles. I have no problem conceding good goals. If we concede a goal, I'll be the first one to say that was a great finish, or that was well worked, or they got around our defense.
Yeah.
But when you see like the first goal, when Lloyd Kelly has just abandoned all concepts of marking, and then the second goal, Lewis Hall is going out to press. I think it's Bowen on the right. Longstaff is behind him. Lewis Hall can't see Longstaff, but Longstaff can see Lewis Hall, and Longstaff just go to the ball as well. Two of them go to the ball, and of all the people in the whole world, lads, Aaron Wan-Bissaka comes from right back. Aaron Wan-Bissaka, who has scored 2 goals in his career in the past. I looked this up yesterday. Scored 2 goals in the 2021 season. One of them was when they beat Southampton 9-0. The other was against Newcastle for Man United. So,
Well,
there's defensive shambles.
Right, look, there's a long diatribe here, right, gentlemen. Let's completely forget about Chelsea result, the Arsenal result, and the Man City result just for a second. Just for a second. Pretend they didn't happen, right? You go back to the 21st of September, losing 3-1 to Fulham, okay? We couldn't score against Everton, even though we missed a penalty. Yeah, I understand that. We lost at home to Brighton the 19th of October, okay? And then we miraculously turn it around with an on-field change of tactics. Eddie Howe and everybody else back in Eddie Howe can say what they wish. The players delivered the 3-1 against Notts Forest because it wasn't working initially. And people would say, oh, it was just halftime team talk or whatever. Go in again to West Ham, 2-0 at home, lost. The very, very simple thing here is that all of those games, and we could have lost that Everton game. The only reason we didn't is because of Big Dan Burn getting in the way with his 7-foot-long legs. But there's very, very clear here. Lloyd Kelly, and I'm glad we didn't pay any money for him. Lloyd Kelly was massively out of his depth the other night. He looked literally frightened of the stadium. I know he started off well, Harry, like you were saying, but again, defensively, and this goes all the way back to the few kind of, 2-1 against Spurs. And we didn't beat Bournemouth either. We got a scrappy 1-0 win against Southampton. We are completely and utterly vulnerable without Botman. Shar, there has to be the mind about, like, I understand, Alan, what you're saying about going forward and everything else, and we do need to change how we're setting up, and we need to have a plan B. But defensively, and we're talking about when we came fourth in that season, that's where we were very, very solid as defensively. And I'm afraid that recruitment has let us down here. And you can say, well, hang on, Christian, we have Hall and we have Tino, future, or obviously active England players and future right back and left back. But again, if there's a huge, massive hole in the middle, because there was a very poignant moment that happened, and I don't know whether you guys saw this, but when we were 1-0 down, the ball came to Kelly, went to Hall, came back to Kelly, and Bruno was standing in the middle of the pitch, and you could see his active frustration of what was going on in front of him. He just ran, took the ball off Lloyd Kelly before he was going to do another crossfield ball, because I'm kind of sick to death of these crossfield balls because Gordon's not in the game, and he hasn't been for a while. And he just kind of tried to take the game by the scruff of the neck. And again, this is where I'm feeling like that Bruno shouldn't be the captain. There's not enough leaders on the pitch. He's a great footballer, but there's not enough leaders on the pitch. And our defense is suffering. There's a clear toxic run right through the midfield, how it's set up. And then we are completely vulnerable at the back. Lloyd Kelly, and guys, you guys can give me what you wish on this, but Lloyd Kelly was miles out of his step the other night. He wasn't anywhere near anything. He's passing, heading, he's marking. What's the West Ham striker that's been out for a while but came back against us? What was his name again? Antonio. Mikel Antonio. Yeah, he had him run ragged. Yeah, he had him all over the place. Yeah, he won a couple of fouls against him, but Mikel Antonio at 34 years of age had Lloyd Kelly on the back of his finger. He was all over him, and then he got nowhere near a block in any of the two attempts, the two goals that we conceded. So it's you can see their heads, and this is again, I know Harry, you had mentioned before about mentality. You could see right across the board that every single player's head went down. And that's not the Newcastle that we're accustomed to. But I'm afraid to let you all know that this has happened since the first day, since the Southampton game. This is running right through the team, and it's going to continue to run right through the team until they start clearing some people out. It's not great having Miggy Almiron on the bench giving out ding dong that he's going to be sold in January when he's close friends with all of these guys. There's something undercurrent that I'm not sure you could write about or really talk about fully, but there's an undercurrent here that something very not right. Jose Mourinho did an interview a couple of years ago, and he said, did you see this, Alan, where he said essentially Newcastle only turn up when it's a big game. They have it in their own mentality that they only go for it. And it's been proven this season, beating Arsenal, beating Chelsea, drawing with Man City, and then against like Everton, West Ham, Bournemouth, and Fulham. These are teams that are below us, as you said, Paul, but they're not really. Are they really? They're not. So, I mean, 8th or 10th if we don't do something in January. And then I read today that we have to sell 2 players before we can buy anybody in January.
Don't believe everything you read.
Okay. But there you go, lads. Sorry, it's to your small question, Paul. It's just that I was furious and had to buy a new TV.
I don't think Kelly was out of his depth. I think that's a bit harsh. It's his first start of it's basically his first more than 10 minutes for us, bar the Salah Cup.
Right.
On the first goal, why are we zonally marking all of a sudden? We did it against Forest. Murillo got now Isak dropped off him, but Murillo ghosted in, free header. Zonally marking again, and there's a free header again, and I'm just going, why the sudden change? We always looked solid when we were going man to man. Now, Dan Burn not being at the back is a massive, massive loss, and I run the Facebook page for ourselves, and I always wouldn't be the biggest fan of Dan Burn. I've always said that he'd be the one to be replaced. I love Dan Burn, but if you're looking at it like that, I instantly was just, you don't know what you've got till it's gone. With Dan Burn yesterday, I was like, mother of God, he just marshals everything so well. And it comes back to the leadership thing again. There was nobody grabbing them by the scruff of the neck saying, come on, we have to do this, we have to do this. You seen Trippier when he came on, tried to do it. It was the 90s. It was the 90th minute. It was game over. It was nearly no point of it. But with Tino coming off with a bit of a knock, and now hear me out, God forbid we needed a bit of a change in midfield. Could Tino go left back if he's fit, Tripped right back, and Hall in the middle, just to change something up? I don't know. Hall has always been like that's what he was. I don't want to take Hall out of his position when he's playing so well, but something has to change.
Let's not do it against Liverpool. Let's put it that way. Let's maybe try it against Palace, but let's not do it against Liverpool at home.
Well, I think the point is something needs to change. I think that's and what I mean by that is it's not just change everything because we've lost one game. I just feel like we are. It's the same system against multiple teams in different situations, rather than having, say plan A and plan B, but having different approaches to different games and different teams, home, away, etc. Whereas it just feels like it's a bit copy and paste week on week. And we saw that a particular example of that was that last season we beat Spurs, hammered Spurs because it worked against Spurs, and then I think it was Palace of all teams we're going to talk about now shortly, just did the same thing and it completely didn't work. So let's see. Hopefully there's a lot of learnings taken from that game at the very least, because we're going to need it down in London. Now, Harry, we don't do too badly traditionally in London. Like when we go to the likes of Fulham, the likes of Palace, I mean, it's always a bit hit and miss, but I think as a general thing, we don't have a terrible record in London. How do you see this weekend going against Palace? Do you see those changes coming in? And I will be pushing you for a prediction just to put you on the plate.
Yeah, it's a difficult one to sort of think about. I think because it's because of what Newcastle are, and because of their inconsistency, as Chris said, there's a sort of sense that each game will impact how you view the next one. And I think if Newcastle, like that was the evidence of they came through against Forest and did really well. And it's so easy to say, oh yeah, Newcastle are back. This is Newcastle like it should be, and they're doing things that they used to do in 22, 23, and it's back to normal. And there were lots of sweeping statements, and not just from fans, but from people sat around me at the City Ground, and myself as well. It felt like it was a marker, and then they come and do this. And I'm always quite worried about Newcastle away from home because just over the last couple of years, that's been the pattern. Specifically, the last 18 months, they've been very good at home and very, very poor away from home. Having said that, I do think that they've got a chance of getting something out of this game, because actually it's very similar sort of like blueprint to what Forest are. Palace will try and turn Newcastle over like Forest did, and have had a little bit of success with it. But Newcastle generally, and especially as the game went on, really managed that sort of pace that Forest had, and that's what Palace have with Sarr, and I don't know if he's fit, but Eze and all those sort of like really, really good, Mateta. There's sort of powerful runners and strong players, which is something that Newcastle have to be aware of, but also that gives them space to turn Palace round as well in the midfield. So I think that if they take into account what they did against Forest and how they did it, and actually how they kept their nerve in that second half, I think that they've got a good chance especially if they sort of impose themselves. To the point earlier about Tonali and Longstaff, I've said this a few times. I don't believe that Eddie Howe sees it as Longstaff or Tonali anymore. I think he believes it's Willock or Tonali. I think it's Longstaff because that was the first defeat with Willock, Longstaff in the team this season. But because the midfield is so sort of like it. I think what Longstaff does, and I've said this many times on different platforms, is it's very easy to say what he doesn't do, because when he's on the ball, he's non-existent. Newcastle they struggle progressively with him in the team, and that's where I think the Tonali argument is absolutely valid, because he does progress. You can when Tonali's on the pitch going forward, you notice it, whereas you don't with Longstaff. But the difference with what Longstaff brings is he tightens everything up. He makes those runs, and the midfield seems to be generally a lot more compact and a lot more knitted together when he's in the team. So I think Eddie Howe will not. It'll take a lot for Eddie Howe not to pick Longstaff, because he's actually tried to go away from it twice in the last couple of years. And actually, at the same point in this season and last season, returned to picking Longstaff for exactly the same reason, which was that the midfield just didn't gel properly without him, and it's more because of what he allows other players to do rather than what he does himself. So I think actually it'll be more likely Tonali will come in, if he comes in at all, for Willock, and I think that's probably good, because it'll tighten things up, and you can bring Willock on in the second half. That's how I would have gone at Forest. I know obviously it worked out, and Willock was brilliant in both halves, but that's how I would have gone then, and that's where I'll go now. So I think Newcastle can get a good result, and I think it'll be 2-1 in Newcastle. But the obvious trepidations are there, and obviously that pacing behind as it was, because that was their undoing at Chelsea. If they're not careful, that can be their undoing here. And it was their undoing at Selhurst Park last season as well. But I think the fact that midfield can turn into different things when Tonali's on the pitch and Willock's on the pitch. I think if you get that right, you can get the blend right, and you can get the win. I think quite fairly comfortably with a decent performance.
Yeah,
I would absolutely take that right now and move on. just to get the 3 points and get back to winning ways, but obviously the performance as well. Alan, I'll ask you then for your, I suppose, prediction and what's behind that.
I'm gonna go. We're gonna get a 2-0 win, but we'll get a goal early. Palace will try to get back into it, and we'll catch them on the break. And with Big Dan Burn coming back in, we'll be solid again at the back. Fingers crossed.
I absolutely love that optimism because I'm not convinced I'm going to get it on the next voice you'll hear, listeners. Chris Show.
Yeah, okay. I don't like being this guy. I don't like being this kind of, I wouldn't say pessimist, but look, we're going to lose this, and it's going to be the second nail in the Eddie Howe coffin. There's 6 left, but this will be the second nail because what's going to happen here is that it's going to, like Harry said, the same with Chelsea. We're going to get caught over the top, and if they look at Al, I'd love for it to be a Notts Forest thing where the whole team collectively go, screw Eddie, and he's overtraining us, and we're too tired, and I hate living up in Newcastle because it's too cold. But let's just go for it and play because I want to sign for Man City next season. Let's go for it. But look, that's not going to happen. All right, it's going to be 2-0 to Crystal Palace. We're going to have 6 shots on target. None of them are going to be anywhere near it, and you're going to have even more grumblings. Harry, on Monday night, I think honestly there was 3,800 messages on the Irish Mags website or on the Irish Mags group chat, and about 1,000 of them happened within the 5 minutes after the match because I think people were literally going to throw themselves into every river that they could find. But look, I'd love to be optimistic about this, but look, something's rotten in the state of Denmark. There's something rotten here. And I'm not blaming it on Eddie Howe, but we've got Barnes on the bench, we've got Tonali on the bench. 2 people that were signed as supposed first-team footballers not being able to fit into a system. Longstaff is a local guy, and he seems like a genuinely nice fella as well. And we do seem to win with him in the team. But this reception that he got, where people cheered when he got taken off, this is all wrong. The fact that 7 or 8 minutes to go before the end of the match last Monday, there was people leaving. I've never seen that in a long time. I've never seen that. I know it was a Monday night. You probably wanted to get home because it was freezing. But look, there's something rotten here. Very, very rotten. And I don't think rot creeps. Yeah, unless you deal with it and fix it. Yeah, rot creeps. And I've got an awful feeling that Crystal Palace is going to be another horribly disjointed performance because there's a lack of confidence here. There's a mentality issue. So 2-0 to Crystal Palace.
This is the worst birthday party ever.
Happy birthday, everybody.
Oh my God. Harry came in with his 2-1 win. I was like, it'll be 2-0, we're fine. Chris Show just brings it all back down, but that's why he's here. No, look, I think there's valid points on both sides. I'm a bit more confident, and I got it completely wrong with West Ham. I actually thought we'd give them a good, easy battering, and I completely got that wrong. Palace, however, are very disjointed at the moment, and what made Palace good last year has completely disappeared this season. You know, Adam Morton was shining for them last season. He's been injured, but not playing well even when he was playing at the beginning of the season. Obviously, they lost Elise. It's became a one-man show with Eze, and Mateta just doesn't look like scoring. So I do feel confident that we can bounce back pretty quick on this one. I think that it will give a kick up the arse to Eddie and the management team to make changes and actually just look at things a bit differently. And I think that's what we need to do. And that could be Tonali, that could be Barnes. I'd love to see them both in and just go at them. So I'm going to go with the 3-1, lads. How's that? 3-1 win to Newcastle. I have to finish on a positive note. I couldn't just end it there. I thought that would be
No worries.
We couldn't let Harry go on that note. That would be the worst. He'd never come back.
No.
Right, before we go, Alan, really quickly, we have meetups happening around Ireland for this Crystal Palace game.
We do indeed. So the usual Bleecker Street meetup, I'll be there because I'm not allowed to go on my travels. But amazingly, the lads in Cork have extended an invite to a couple of the Dublin lads, and Tev told me I wasn't allowed to go. So if you want to get out to Cork, you have the lovely choice of Quinlan's, where all the lads will be, and then of course up in Belfast in the Doyen, we have another meetup, and obviously all those details will be on our website and theirishmags.com. So anyone in and around any of those 3 cities, come in and join the Irish Magnus.
Excellent. Nice, Harry. That could be an excuse to get over to Belfast.
There you go.
Hell yeah.
Excellent stuff. Well, that brings episode 52 and our happy birthday party, 1 year anniversary celebrations, etc., to a close. A massive thank you to Harry for joining us. Harry, before we let you jump off, where can people find you on the internet, not in real life?
yeah, not real life.
For the first time ever, I'm going to say you can find me on Blue Sky first, then over Twitter.
Yes, love it.
Harry the Cosmo on Blue Sky, whatever .blue sky or whatever it is. But basically, my name Harry DeCosmo on that on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You'll find me. But crucially on YouTube because I'm trying to build my subscriber base and do various things on there. So yeah, if you search my name in all those places, I'm sure you'll find me.
There's not that many Harry DeCosmos around the world, I believe. And there's only one on the Irish Mag Show. We will put links to all Harry's links in the description below. You'll find that Spotify, YouTube, Apple, all of the places, as well as all our own links for the Irish Mag socials. And as Alan said, theirishmags.com, where we have all the information about meetups, about travel, and more importantly, all of the photo galleries have been updated, including the recent trip to West Ham, because we had a gang of Irish Mags traveling.
Certainly did.
All the galleries have been updated. We'll be back for more Irish Magnus next week. So until then, how are the lads? Slán go fóill, and we'll see you all very soon.